Captain Sarah Chen rubbed her tired eyes as she stared at the quantum communication array's main display. 3 months into her rotation aboard Deep Space Station Hermes, the excitement of monitoring signals from distant stars had worn thin. Most days brought nothing but cosmic background noise and the occasional automated beacon from human mining operations. The coffee in her mug had gone cold hours ago, but she took another sip anyway. The bitter taste helped keep her awake during the long night shift. Around her, the station hummed with quiet efficiency. Banks of computers processed terabytes of data every second, searching for any sign of intelligent life among the stars. Then the display flickered. Sarah sat up straight, her heart suddenly racing. A new signal had appeared on the main screen, weak but definitely artificial. The computer was already working to isolate and enhance it, running the signal through dozens of filters to remove cosmic interference. "This is interesting," she muttered, leaning forward to examine the data stream. The signal was unlike anything in their databases. It used quantum encryption methods that seemed almost familiar, yet different enough to suggest alien origin. She called up the linguistics AI and fed it the raw data. "What do you make of this, Arya?" The artificial intelligence's synthesized voice filled the command center. "Captain Chen, this signal shows characteristics of the Zephyrian communication protocols we encountered during first contact 15 years ago. However, the encryption is much more complex than their standard transmissions." Sarah's pulse quickened. The Zephyrians were a peaceful alliance of 7 different species from the Kepler 442 system, over 1,000 light-years away. Humanity had made contact with them in 2372, but relations had been strained. The Zephyrians had been horrified by Earth's violent history, and had politely declined most offers of cooperation. They had called humans Deathworlders, beings from a planet so dangerous that it had created a species capable of incredible violence. The Zephyrians preferred their peaceful civilization and wanted little to do with Earth's warriors. "Can you decode it?" Sarah asked. "Working on it now, Captain. The signal appears to be fragmented, possibly due to distance and interference. I'm detecting mathematical sequences that appear to be coordinates." Sarah stood up and began pacing. A signal from the Zephyrians after 15 years of silence could mean many things. Had they finally decided to open diplomatic relations? Or was something wrong? Minutes ticked by as Arya worked on the encryption. The signal was incredibly weak, suggesting it had traveled an enormous distance. Sarah pulled up stellar charts confirming that Kepler 442 was indeed 1/200 light-years away. For a signal to reach Earth from that distance, it would have to be incredibly powerful. "Captain?" Arya's voice carried a note of urgency that made Sarah's blood run cold. "I've managed to decode portions of the transmission. You need to see this." The main display shifted, showing waves of alien text alongside Arya's translation. Sarah read the words with growing horror. "Emergency transmission. Confederation worlds under attack. Unprecedented threat from beyond. The Devourers have come." "Keep working on it," Sarah said, her voice tight. She activated the emergency communication system and sent a priority message to Earth Command. Whatever was happening in the Kepler 442 system, it was serious enough for the pacifist Zephyrians to break their long silence. Over the next hour, Arya slowly pieced together more of the message. Each new fragment painted a darker picture. The signal spoke of worlds going dark, of something consuming entire star systems, of a threat unlike anything the galaxy had ever seen. But it was the final decoded section that made Sarah's hand shake as she read it. 3 worlds already lost. Biospheres completely consumed. Our defenses useless against them. We know of the Deathworld warriors of Sol. Please, if you can hear this, we were wrong to fear you. Help us." Sarah stared at the message in stunned silence. The Zephyrians, who had once rejected humanity's offers of military cooperation, were now begging for help from the very Deathworlders they had tried to avoid. She immediately sent the decoded transmission to Earth Command, marking it with the highest priority codes. Within minutes, her communication console lit up with incoming calls from admirals, generals, and government officials. Admiral Marcus Torres was the first to reach her directly. His weathered face appeared on her screen, lines of concern etched deep around his eyes. "Captain Chen, I need you to verify this transmission." "Are you absolutely certain it's genuine?" "Yes, sir," Sarah replied. ARIA has confirmed the quantum signatures match known Zephyrian protocols. The signal's origin point is definitely the Kepler 442 system. And sir, there's something else. She pulled up the signal analysis data. The power requirements to send a message this far would be enormous. They'd have to use their entire planetary communication grid. This isn't just a distress call, it's a final desperate plea. Torres nodded grimly. How much of the message have you decoded? About 60%, sir. Arya is still working on the rest, but what we have paints a grim picture. Something called the Devourers has attacked their system. 3 of their 7 worlds are already gone. Devourers, Torres repeated, his voice thoughtful. We've never encountered anything by that name. Any details on what they are? Sarah shook her head. The signal mentions they consume entire biospheres, but the technical details are still encrypted. What we do know is that the Zephyrians' normal defenses were completely useless against them. The Admiral was quiet for a long moment, studying the data on his own screen. Captain, I want you to keep working on that signal. Extract every piece of information you can. And Chen? Yes, sir? This conversation is classified at the highest levels. We can't afford to cause panic until we know exactly what we're dealing with. After Torres disconnected, Sarah turned back to the main display. Arya was still working tirelessly to decode the remaining fragments of the message. Each new piece revealed more details about the attack on the Zephyrian worlds. The Devourers appeared to be some kind of hive-minded species that literally consumed planets. They didn't just conquer worlds, they digested them, stripping away every trace of life and converting the biomass into more of themselves. Their ships were described as living entities growing and adapting as they fed. But what troubled Sarah most was the tone of desperation in the Zephyrian message. These were beings who had achieved peace across 7 different species, who had built a civilization based on cooperation and nonviolence. For them to reach out to humanity, to the Deathworlders they had once feared, meant their situation was truly hopeless. As she worked through the night, more fragments came together. The signal contained coordinates for emergency evacuation routes, technical data about the attacking forces, and increasingly desperate pleas for assistance. The final decoded section was a simple message that sent chills down Sarah's spine. We understand now why your world made you warriors. We should have listened. If anyone receives this, please remember that we tried to choose peace. Remember the Zephyrian Confederation. And if you are the warriors of Salt, please, avenge us. Sarah sat back in her chair, the weight of the message settling over her like a heavy blanket. Somewhere, 200 light-years away, an entire civilization was being destroyed by something they couldn't fight. And in their final moments, they had turned to the one species they had once rejected, the dangerous humans from the death world called Earth. She looked up at the stars visible through the station's observation windows, knowing that by the time this message had reached them, the Zephyrian Confederation might already be gone. But the signal was also a warning, and perhaps a chance for humanity to prove they were more than just dangerous warriors. They were protectors. Admiral Marcus Torres stood at the head of the conference table, his steel-gray eyes scanning the faces of Earth's top military commanders. The emergency session of Terran Fleet Command had been called within hours of receiving Captain Chen's decoded transmission. Now, 12 hours later, the Situation Room buzzed with tension as the full scope of the crisis became clear. Ladies and gentlemen, Torres began, his voice carrying the weight of command. What you're about to see will change everything we thought we knew about galactic security. The main holographic display activated, showing a 3-dimensional map of the Kepler 442 system. 7 planets orbited the central star, but 3 of them now showed as dark, lifeless spheres. General Patricia Williams, head of the Marine Corps, leaned forward. Admiral, help me understand this. The Zephyrians have been silent for 15 years. Now they're asking for help from the very people they called too dangerous to associate with. That's correct, General, Torres replied. And according to our analysis, they had good reason to break that silence. He gestured to the display, which now showed detailed scans of the affected worlds. 3 entire planets have been stripped of all biological matter. Not conquered, consumed. Dr. Yuki Tanaka, the fleet's chief physicist, studied the data with growing alarm. The energy readings are off the charts. Whatever did this consumed biomass on a planetary scale in a matter of weeks. That should be physically impossible. Admiral Rebecca Foster, commander of the Fifth Fleet, spoke up. What exactly are these devourers the message mentioned? Torres touched a control, and the display shifted to show fragments of alien ship designs extracted from the Zephyrian transmission. The vessels looked organic, like enormous space-dwelling creatures rather than constructed ships. Based on the signal data, they appear to be a hive-minded species that evolved in the void between galaxies, Torres explained. They don't build ships and they grow them. They don't use weapons, they evolve them. And they've been traveling through dark space for millions of years, consuming entire star systems. The room fell silent as the implications sank in. General Williams was the first to speak.
How did they find our galaxy?
Unknown, Torres admitted. But according to the Zephyrian data, they're not just raiders or conquerors. They're a plague. They consume everything organic and convert it into more of themselves. If they're not stopped in the Kepler 442 system, they'll spread throughout this entire galactic arm. Captain David Park, Torres's strategic advisor, pulled up tactical analyses on his tablet. Sir, we need to address the elephant in the room. Kepler 442 is 1,200 light-years away. Even our fastest ships would take 18 months to reach them using conventional hyperspace lanes. By then it'll be over, Torres finished. Which brings us to Dr. Tanaka's proposal. All eyes turned to the physicist, who looked uncomfortable under their scrutiny. The quantum tunnel drive project, she began hesitantly. We've been working on it for 5 years, but it's still experimental. Highly experimental. Explain it in terms we can understand, General Williams requested. Dr. Tanaka activated a new display showing space-time diagrams. Instead of traveling through hyperspace, quantum tunnel drives fold space-time itself. They create a temporary wormhole that allows near-instantaneous travel across vast distances. In theory, we could reach Kepler 442 in just 3 days. In theory, Admiral Foster repeated. What about in practice? That's the problem, Dr. Tanaka admitted. We've only tested the technology on unmanned probes. The power requirements are enormous and the process is incredibly dangerous. Our simulations show a 30% chance of catastrophic failure for any ship attempting the jump. The room erupted in concerned murmurs. A 30% chance of losing ships before they even reached the battle was unacceptable by normal standards. General Williams shook her head. We can't ask our people to take odds like that. With respect, General, came a voice from the back of the room. Colonel Maria Santos, one of the Marine Corps' most decorated officers, stepped forward. Isn't that exactly what we should be asking? All heads turned toward her. Santos was known for her direct approach and her experience in the outer colonies, where danger was a daily reality. Colonel, Torres prompted. Sir, the Zephyrians called us Deathworlders because Earth taught us to face impossible odds. We evolved on a planet where everything tried to kill us. Predators, weather, disease, even other humans. That's why we became who we are. She gestured to the display showing the consumed worlds. This is exactly the kind of fight we were made for. Admiral Foster frowned. You're talking about potentially sacrificing entire fleets. I'm talking about doing what needs to be done, Santos replied firmly. The Zephyrians were pacifists. They built their civilization on avoiding conflict. When something like this shows up, they can't fight it. But we can. Torres studied the faces around the table. He could see the conflict in their expressions. The military instinct to protect their forces warring with the understanding that sometimes great risks were necessary. There's something else to consider, Dr. Tanaka added quietly. The quantum tunnel technology requires enormous amounts of exotic matter. We only have enough to send one fleet. If we do this, we're committing everything we have. Captain Park looked up from his calculations. How many ships could we send? The 5th Expeditionary Fleet, Torres answered. 12 capital ships, 36 cruisers, and full support vessels. About 40,000 personnel total. The weight of the decision settled over the room like a heavy blanket. They were discussing sending humanity's most advanced fleet on a mission with a 30% chance of failure to fight an enemy they knew almost nothing about. For people who had rejected them 15 years earlier, General Williams broke the silence. Why should we risk our people for aliens who wanted nothing to do with us? It was Colonel Santos who answered. Because that's what humans do, General. We protect people who can't protect themselves. Even people who don't like us. Torres nodded slowly. The Colonel makes a good point. But there's more at stake here than just the Zephyrian Confederation. He highlighted the galactic map, showing the probable path of the Devourer advance. If these things aren't stopped, they'll consume world after world. Eventually, they'll reach human space. So we're not just saving the Zephyrians, Admiral Foster realized. We're buying time for our own defenses. Exactly. And maybe if we're lucky, we'll learn how to fight them. Dr. Tanaka cleared her throat. There's one more thing. The quantum tunnel drive is a one-way trip. The exotic matter consumption means we can't bring the fleet back the same way. They'd have to fight their way to a conventional hyperspace route or die trying. Torres finished. The room fell silent again. The mission parameters were becoming clear. Send humanity's best fleet through experimental technology that might destroy them, to fight an unknown enemy that had already consumed 3 worlds, with no guaranteed way home. Admiral Foster stood up slowly. Admiral Torres, you're asking us to approve what amounts to a suicide mission. I'm asking you to approve what might be our only chance to stop a galactic extinction event, Torres replied. The Zephyrians were right about one thing. We are Deathworlders. We come from a planet that taught us to face death rather than surrender to it. Maybe it's time to show the galaxy what that really means. One by one, the senior officers cast their votes. It wasn't unanimous, but it was enough. The 5th Expeditionary Fleet would make the quantum tunnel jump to Kepler 442. As the meeting broke up, Colonel Santos approached Torres. Sir, I want to volunteer for the ground forces. Colonel, you understand what we're asking? She smiled grimly. Sir, I've been preparing for this fight my entire life. We all have. Earth made us warriors. Now it's time to prove we're also protectors. Torres looked out through the station's viewport at the stars beyond. Somewhere out there, 200 light-years away, an ancient evil was consuming worlds. But Earth was about to send its children to the stars, carrying with them all the fury and determination that only a death world could produce. The Devourers were about to learn why the galaxy feared humanity. Captain Elena Vasquez gripped the arms of her command chair as the dreadnought Indomitable prepared for quantum tunnel activation. Around her, the bridge crew worked with practiced efficiency, their faces reflecting the same mixture of determination and barely controlled fear that she felt in her own chest. All stations report ready. Captain, announced Commander James Walsh, her executive officer. Quantum tunnel drive is charged and standing by. Through the main viewport, Elena could see the rest of the 5th Expeditionary Fleet arranged in formation around them. 12 massive capital ships, their hulls bristling with weapons that could crack planets. 36 cruisers built for speed and firepower. Dozens of support vessels carrying supplies, ammunition, and the tools needed to fight a war far from home. But what made these ships truly different from anything else in the galaxy wasn't their weapons or their armor. It was their design philosophy. While most spacefaring species built elegant vessels meant to avoid conflict, human ships were mobile fortresses, created by a species that had spent millions of years fighting everything from saber-toothed tigers to each other. Captain Vasquez, came Admiral Torres's voice over the fleet communication channel. Final systems check in 30 seconds. Elena activated her ship-wide address system. This is the captain. All hands prepare for quantum tunnel transition. Remember what we trained for. Remember why we're here. Earth stands behind us and innocent lives depend on us. She looked around the bridge at her crew. These were people born on a world where gravity tried to crush them, where storms could level cities, where the very ecosystem was designed to kill anything that wasn't strong enough to survive. That harsh environment had forged them into something the galaxy had never seen before. Lieutenant Sarah Kim, the navigation officer, looked up from her console. Captain, I'm reading massive energy buildup in the quantum field generators. Transition in 10 seconds. Elena closed her eyes briefly, thinking about the 30% chance that her ship and everyone on it would simply cease to exist in the next few moments. But that was the price of being human. They had learned long ago that some things were worth dying for. All ships, Torres's voice commanded across the fleet channel, execute quantum tunnel transition now. The universe exploded into chaos. Space-time folded around the Indomitable like a crushing fist. Elena felt her consciousness stretched across impossible dimensions as reality twisted and bent. The ship's hull groaned under stresses that shouldn't have been possible, and warning alarms screamed throughout the vessel. For a terrifying moment that lasted both an instant and an eternity, Elena existed in the space between spaces, feeling the quantum foam of the universe itself pressing against her mind. She could sense her crew around her, their thoughts and fears bleeding through the dimensional barriers. Then, as suddenly as it had begun, the transition ended. The Indomitable burst back into normal space with a thunderclap of displaced energy. Elena gasped, her vision clearing as she stared at the tactical display. Around them, other ships were materializing as the quantum fields collapsed. "Damage report," she called out, her voice hoarse. "Hull integrity at 92%, reported Chief Engineer Rodriguez. Quantum drive is offline as expected. Conventional engines operating normally. Navigation, where are we?" Lieutenant Kim's hands flew over her controls, comparing their position to stellar reference points. "Captain, we're in the Kepler 442 system. The quantum tunnel worked. We're here." Elena felt a surge of relief, but it was short-lived. "Fleet status?" Commander Walsh monitored the communication channels as other ships reported in. 39 vessels confirmed operational. The cruiser Defiant suffered catastrophic quantum containment failure during transition. No survivors. The destroyer Vigilant has severe damage but is still functional. Elena bowed her head for a moment, honoring the 300 souls lost to the quantum tunnel. They had known the risks, but that didn't make their sacrifice any easier to bear. "Captain," Lieutenant Kim's voice was urgent. "You need to see this." The main display shifted to show a view of the Kepler 442 system. What Elena saw made her blood run cold. 4 of the 7 Zephyrian worlds were now completely dark, their surfaces stripped bare of all life. The 3 remaining planets showed signs of ongoing destruction, massive organic shapes moving across their surfaces like cancer. "My God," whispered Commander Walsh. "What did this?" The answer came in the form of movement at the edge of the system. Massive shapes began emerging from behind the outer planets, ships that looked more like living creatures than constructed vessels. They were enormous, each one the size of a small moon, with surfaces that pulsed and writhed like living tissue. "Devourer bioships," Elena said grimly. "Just like the Zephyrian transmission described." The tactical officer, Lieutenant Marcus Chen, studied his readings with growing alarm. "Captain, I'm counting at least 20 of those things. Each one is reading as approximately 15 kilometers long and showing massive energy signatures." Elena activated the fleet communication channel. "All ships, this is Vasquez. Form attack formation Delta. Target the nearest bioship cluster." The human fleet began to move with deadly precision. Unlike the elegant, peaceful vessels of most galactic civilizations, human warships moved like predators, quick, aggressive, and utterly without mercy. Captain James Park's voice crackled over the communication channel from his destroyer squadron. "Elena, my stealth ships are getting close-range scans of those things. They're not just ships, they're alive. The hulls are actually organic tissue, and I'm reading what looks like a nervous system running through the entire structure." "Copy that, James. Can your ships penetrate their defenses?" "We're about to find out." Elena watched as Park's destroyers activated their cloaking systems and began their approach. Human stealth technology was based on lessons learned hunting in Earth's deep oceans, where predators had to remain invisible to survive. The bioships seemed to have no sensors capable of detecting the approaching human vessels. "This is Park. Beginning attack run now." The destroyers struck without warning, their weapons tearing into the bioship's organic hull. Unlike the energy weapons favored by most species, human ships carried kinetic weapons. Massive projectiles accelerated to significant fractions of light speed. When they hit, they didn't just damage their targets, they obliterated them. The bioship convulsed as the kinetic rounds punched through its living tissue, but instead of dying, it began to change. Elena watched in fascination and horror as the creature's wounds began to seal themselves, and new growths appeared along its hull. "It's adapting," she realized. "The thing is actually evolving defenses against our weapons." "All ships switch to thermal weapons," Torres commanded. "If they can adapt to kinetic rounds, let's see how they handle fusion torches." The human fleet opened fire with everything they had. Nuclear missiles streaked through space, followed by streams of superheated plasma from the ship's main guns. The bioships writhed under the assault, their organic hulls burning and melting. But they fought back. Streams of living projectiles shot out from the bioships, creatures that moved through space like missiles, but showed all the signs of biological life. When they struck human vessels, they didn't just explode. They tried to burrow into the hull, attempting to consume the ship's structure. Evasive maneuvers, Elena commanded as a cluster of bio-missiles streaked toward the Indomitable. Point defense systems, full activation. The ship's defensive weapons, originally designed to shoot down incoming asteroids and space debris, proved effective against the living missiles. But Elena could see that this was just the beginning. The bioships were learning, adapting, becoming more dangerous with each passing moment. Captain, Commander Walsh reported, Colonel Santos is requesting permission to begin dropship operations. She wants to take her Marines to the surface of the remaining Zephyrian worlds. Elena stared at the tactical display showing the 3 surviving planets, their surfaces crawling with unknown horrors. The idea of sending ground troops into that nightmare seemed like madness, but that was what humans did. They went where others couldn't or wouldn't go. They faced the impossible and made it possible. Permission granted, she said. Tell the Colonel that the fleet will provide orbital fire support. As the first wave of human dropships launched toward the embattled worlds below, Elena realized that this battle would determine more than just the fate of the Zephyrian Confederation. It would show the galaxy what humanity was truly capable of when they stopped holding back. The Devourers had consumed 3 worlds already, but they had never faced an enemy that had been forged in the crucible of a death world. They were about to learn why the galaxy both feared and needed the warriors from Earth. The real war was just beginning. Colonel Maria Santos felt the familiar weight of her combat armor as the dropship Thunderbolt began its descent toward the surface of Zephyrian Prime. Around her, 24 of her best Marines checked their weapons and equipment. With the calm efficiency of warriors who had trained for this moment their entire lives. 2 minutes to drop. Zone, announced Sergeant Jake Morrison, the squad leader. His scarred face showed no emotion, but Santos could see the anticipation in his eyes. Morrison had survived tours on 3 different colony worlds, where everything from the weather to the local wildlife had tried to kill him. Through the dropship's viewport, Santos could see the devastation below. What had once been the jewel of the Zephyrian Confederation was now a nightmare landscape. Massive organic structures covered the planet's surface like cancer, pulsing with alien life. Between them, she could see movement, creatures that defied easy description scuttling across the barren ground. Colonel, came Captain Vasquez's voice over the communication channel. We're tracking massive bioforms converging on your landing zone. Whatever you're planning to do down there, you'll have company. Copy that, Captain. We'll handle our end. Just keep those bioships off our backs. Santos activated her squad communication system. Listen up, Marines. Intel says the Zephyrians have a refugee center about 5 kilometers from our landing zone. Our job is to reach them, evacuate as many civilians as possible, and extract to the secondary pickup point. Private Lisa Chen, the youngest member of the squad, looked nervous. Colonel, what if those things can adapt to our weapons like the bioships did? Santos smiled grimly. Then we'll adapt faster. That's what humans do. The dropship shuddered as it entered the planet's atmosphere. Through the viewport, Santos could see the alien landscape rushing up to meet them. What struck her most was how wrong everything looked. The organic structures weren't built, they were grown, following patterns that hurt to look at directly. 30 seconds, Morrison called out. Santos checked her rifle one last time. Standard Marine issue, designed for maximum stopping power and reliability, but she also carried something special. A weapon that had been developed specifically for this mission based on the limited data from the Zephyrian transmission. Contact in 10 seconds. The dropship touched down hard on what had once been a Zephyrian city park. Santos was first out the door, her rifle already scanning for targets. What she saw made her stomach turn. The park had been consumed by something that looked like a cross between coral and cancer. Twisted organic spires reached toward the sky, pulsing with a sickly light. Between them, creatures moved with purpose, things that might once have been animals but had been transformed into something else entirely. Perimeter secure, reported Morrison as the squad spread out in formation, but we've got movement all around us. Santos consulted her tactical display, which showed the location of the Zephyrian Refugee Center. 5 kilometers northeast. Let's move. They had barely traveled 100 meters. When the first attack came, the creature burst from the ground directly in front of them. Something that looked like a giant spider made of living metal and flesh. Its 8 legs ended in razor-sharp claws, and its body was covered in what looked like weapons that had grown rather than been built. Contact front, Morrison yelled, opening fire with his plasma rifle. The squad responded instantly, pouring fire into the creature, but instead of dying, it began to change. Its carapace shifted and hardened, adapting to deflect their energy weapons. Switch to kinetics, Santos ordered, raising her own rifle and firing a burst of explosive rounds. The kinetic rounds punched through the creature's adaptive armor, sending it stumbling backward. But even as it died, Santos could see other shapes moving toward them through the organic maze. "They're learning from what happened to the first one," observed Corporal David Park, the squad's tech specialist. "Each attack is going to be harder." Santos nodded grimly. "Then we'll have to learn faster. Morrison, take point. Chen, watch our six. Everyone else, stay sharp." They moved through the transformed cityscape like ghosts, using every trick they had learned fighting in Earth's harshest environments. The organic structures provided cover, but they also seemed to pulse with awareness as if the entire landscape was watching them. "Colonel," Chen's voice was tight with tension, "I'm picking up movement behind us." "Big movement." Santos glanced back to see something that made her blood run cold. A massive creature was following them. Something the size of a building that moved on dozens of legs. Its body was covered in what looked like sensors and weapons, and it was clearly tracking their progress. "Hunter-killer," she realized. "The Devourers have adapted something specifically to hunt us." The squad picked up the pace, but Santos knew they couldn't outrun the massive creature indefinitely. They needed a plan. "Park, can you hack into any of these organic structures?" The tech specialist looked at her as if she'd gone crazy. "Colonel, these things aren't machines. They're alive." "Everything alive has a nervous system," Santos replied. "Find it." As they moved deeper into the transformed city, Santos began to understand the true horror of what the Devourers were doing. This wasn't just conquest or even consumption. It was transformation on a fundamental level. They were rewriting the very essence of the planet, turning it into something that served their purposes. But they had made one crucial mistake. They had never encountered anything like humans before. "Colonel," Morrison's voice was urgent. "Contact ahead. But these ones are different." Santos moved up to see what he meant and felt her heart sink. Blocking their path were creatures that had once been Zephyrians. The graceful, peaceful beings had been transformed into something twisted and horrible, but she could still see traces of their original forms. "They're using the civilians as weapons," she whispered. It was perhaps the most evil thing she had ever encountered. The Devourers weren't just killing the Zephyrians. They were turning them into instruments of their own species' destruction. "Orders, Colonel?" Morrison asked quietly. Santos stared at the transformed Zephyrians, knowing that somewhere inside those twisted forms might still be thinking, feeling beings who were trapped in their own bodies. But she also knew that her mission was to save the survivors, not the already lost. "Mercy rounds," she ordered. "Make it quick." The squad opened fire with specially designed ammunition that would kill quickly and cleanly. It wasn't easy, but it was necessary. Sometimes being human meant making the hard choices that others couldn't. They had almost reached the refugee center when the hunter-killer finally caught up with them. The massive creature erupted from the organic ground like a living earthquake, its dozens of weapons all turning toward the small squad of humans. "Scatter," Santos yelled, diving for cover behind a twisted spire. The creature opened fire with weapons that seemed to grow from its body. Streams of acid, explosive projectiles that writhed through the air like snakes, and energy beams that burned through anything they touched. But Santos had been preparing for this moment. She pulled out her special weapon, a device that the science teams had developed based on Dr. Tanaka's quantum field research. "Everyone stay down," she shouted, activating the device. The quantum disruptor sent waves of chaotic energy through the local space-time field. For most matter, the effect was minimal, but for the Devourer's biotechnology, which seemed to depend on quantum-level biological processes, it was devastating. The hunter-killer convulsed as its nervous system was disrupted by the quantum interference. Its weapon stopped firing and it began to collapse in on itself. "Move! Move! Move!" Santos yelled, leading her squad toward the refugee center. They reached the building just as the quantum disruptor's effects wore off. Inside, they found what they had come for. Several dozen Zephyrian civilians huddled together in terror. The refugees looked at the human soldiers with a mixture of fear and desperate hope. These were beings who had once called humans too dangerous to associate with. Now they were looking to those same Deathworlders as their only salvation. "We're here to get you out," Santos told them in the universal translation language. "But we need to move fast." As her squad prepared the refugees for evacuation, Santos contacted the fleet. "Vasquez, this is Santos. We have 37 civilians ready for pickup. But the situation down here is worse than we thought. The Devourers aren't just consuming the planets. They're transforming them into weapons." "Copy that, Colonel. Extraction team is en route." Santos looked out through the building's windows at the twisted landscape beyond. The hunter-killer was already regenerating, and she could see more creatures moving toward their position. But for the first time since arriving in this system, she felt something like hope. The Devourers might be able to adapt to human weapons, but they couldn't adapt to human determination. And sometimes that made all the difference. Admiral Marcus Torres stood on the bridge of the flagship Defiance, watching the tactical display with growing concern. The battle had been raging for 18 hours, and while the human fleet had managed to destroy several bioships, more kept arriving from deep space. Worse, the remaining bioships were adapting faster than his forces could develop new countermeasures. "Sir," reported Captain Lisa Park from the intelligence station, "long-range sensors are detecting massive movement in the outer system. The Devourers appear to be bringing in reinforcements." Torres studied the sensor data with a sinking heart. Dozens of new bioships were entering the system, each one larger and more heavily armed than the ones they had already faced. At this rate, the human fleet would be overwhelmed within days. "Admiral," came Dr. Tanaka's voice over the communication channel from the science vessel Discovery, "I need to speak with you immediately. It's about the Devourer's true nature." "Go ahead, Doctor." "Sir, they're not just a species that consumes planets. They're something much worse. Based on the data we've collected from the bioships, I believe they're a galactic plague that has been spreading across the universe for millions of years. They've already consumed entire galaxy clusters." The bridge fell silent as the implications sank in. Torres felt a chill run down his spine. "Are you saying they can't be stopped?" "Not with conventional warfare. Every time we destroy one of their ships, the others learn from it. They're evolving faster than we can adapt. But I think I've found another way." Torres activated the secure communication channel. "Explain." "The quantum tunnel drive we used to get here, it doesn't just fold space. It creates massive gravitational distortions. If we could amplify that effect and direct it at the system's star..." "You're talking about triggering stellar collapse," Torres realized. "Exactly. An artificial supernova would destroy everything in this system, including the Devourer fleet. It's the only way to stop them from spreading to other worlds." Torres stared at the tactical display showing the 3 remaining Zephyrian worlds. Colonel Santos and her teams were still evacuating civilians from the surface. Millions of beings called this system home. "Doctor, you're asking me to destroy an entire star system. I'm asking you to save the galaxy, sir. If these things escape this system, they'll consume world after world until there's nothing left. The Zephyrians understand this. I've been in contact with their leaders and they agree that it's the only way." Admiral Foster's voice cut into the conversation from the heavy cruiser Indomitable. "Admiral, we're receiving a communication from the Zephyrian leadership on the evacuation ships. It put them through." The main display shifted to show a group of alien beings, whose graceful forms were marred by exhaustion and despair. Their leader, an elderly Zephyrian named Celestial Singer of Harmony, spoke in the universal translation language. "Admiral Torres of the human fleet," the alien began, "we wish to express our gratitude for your sacrifice in coming to our aid. But we also understand what must be done. Our worlds are already lost. If our deaths can prevent these creatures from spreading to other systems, then we accept that fate." Torres felt the weight of command pressing down on him like a physical force. "Celestial Singer, there has to be another way. We're still evacuating your people. Admiral, there are millions of our people on those worlds, but there are billions more throughout the galaxy who will die if the Devourers escape. As leaders, we both understand the mathematics of sacrifice." The communication ended, leaving Torres staring at the empty screen. Around him, his bridge crew waited for orders, their faces reflecting the same grim understanding that he felt. "Sir," came Captain Vasquez's voice from the Indomitable. "Colonel Santos reports that her teams have evacuated approximately 2,000 civilians from the surface. But the bioforms are adapting to our tactics. She estimates we have maybe 6 hours before they're completely overrun." Torres activated the fleet-wide communication channel. "All ships, this is Admiral Torres. Prepare for Operation Starfall. We're going to collapse the system's primary star. The response was immediate and overwhelming. Ship captains began reporting readiness for the most desperate mission any human fleet had ever attempted. They were going to destroy a star to save the galaxy. Dr. Tanaka's voice crackled over the intercom. Admiral, I'm transmitting the technical specifications to all ships. We'll need to coordinate the quantum field generators on every vessel to create a focused gravitational wave. The timing has to be perfect. How long do we have once we start the process? Approximately 30 minutes before stellar collapse begins. After that, we'll have maybe 10 minutes to clear the system before the shockwave reaches us. Torres looked at the evacuation schedule on his display. At their current rate, they could save perhaps 10,000 Zephyrian civilians, a tiny fraction of those still trapped on the surface. Colonel Santos, he called over the communication channel. Status report. Sir, we're loading the last group of refugees now. But there are still millions down here. We need more time. Colonel, you have 30 minutes. After that, we begin stellar collapse. There was a long pause before Santos responded. Understood, sir. We'll save who we can. Torres activated the quantum field generators throughout the fleet. Every human ship began to emit carefully calibrated gravitational waves, focusing them on the system's star. The process was incredibly dangerous. A mistake in the calculations could destroy the fleet instead of the star. Field generators at full power, reported the chief engineer. Gravitational wave coherence at 98%. On the tactical display, Torres could see the star beginning to respond to the artificial gravitational pressure. Its outer layers started to fluctuate as the quantum fields disrupted its natural fusion processes. Sir, came an urgent voice from the sensor station. The bioships are reacting to what we're doing. They're converging on our position. Torres watched as dozens of Devourer vessels began moving toward the human fleet with desperate speed. They had finally realized what the humans were planning, and they were trying to stop it. All ships, defensive formation. We need to hold them off for 20 more minutes. The final battle was unlike anything the galaxy had ever seen. Human ships designed for maximum destruction faced off against alien bioships that could adapt and evolve in real time. Weapons that had worked hours earlier were now useless, but human ingenuity found new ways to kill. Captain Park's destroyer squadron used ramming attacks, turning their ships into kinetic weapons. The bioships couldn't adapt fast enough to avoid physical collision at relativistic speeds. Meanwhile, Colonel Santos and her Marines fought desperately on the planet's surface, holding evacuation zones against increasingly sophisticated bioforms. The creatures had learned to coordinate their attacks, but humans had thousands of years of experience fighting coordinated enemies. 15 minutes to stellar collapse, Dr. Tanaka announced. The star's core is beginning to destabilize. Torres watched the evacuation numbers climbing slowly. 12,000 saved, 15,000, 20,000. Each number represented lives that would continue, but it was a fraction of those they were leaving behind. 10 minutes to collapse. All evacuation ships need to clear the system immediately. The last wave of refugee ships launched from the planet's surface, carrying what survivors they could. Colonel Santos and her Marines were among the last to leave, fighting a running battle to the extraction point. 5 minutes to collapse. Fleet formation for emergency jump to hyperspace. The human ships began to withdraw from their positions around the star, their quantum field generators still focused on the stellar core. The bioships tried to follow, but they were too late. Stellar collapse initiated, Dr. Tanaka announced. All ships, emergency jump now. The human fleet disappeared into hyperspace just as the star began its final death throes. Behind them, the Kepler 442 system was consumed by an artificial supernova that burned away every trace of the Devourer infestation. 6 months later, Torres stood on the observation deck of the new Zephyrian colony ship, watching as they approached their new home system. The surviving Zephyrians had chosen to settle near human space, forming the first true alliance between the peaceful Confederation and the Deathworlders of Earth. Celestial Singer of Harmony approached him, moving with the careful grace of her species. Admiral Torres, my people have been discussing what happened in our home system. We realize now that we were wrong to fear you. Torres nodded. We're not monsters, Celestial Singer. We're just people who learned to fight because our world gave us no choice. Yes, we understand that now. But what we didn't understand before is that sometimes The galaxy needs people who are willing to make the hard choices, who are willing to sacrifice everything to protect others. Torres looked out at the stars, knowing that somewhere out there, other devourer fleets might be moving toward inhabited systems. But he also knew that humanity would be watching, ready to stand between the darkness and the light. The universe is a dangerous place, he said quietly. Someone has to guard the guardians. The Zephyrian touched his arm with one graceful hand. Then we are fortunate that the universe created the humans of Earth, the Deathworlders who chose to become protectors. As their new fleet moved toward their new home, Torres smiled.